Hi everyone, I'm Janey Brown, and this is my presentation on self-care for counselors. What we'll cover today. We'll begin with what research has already told us about burnout and compassion fatigue in helping professions, including the personal and ethical consequences and implications of neglecting self-care. I will then move from theory to practice, examining the M3 framework, which includes movement, music, and mindset strategies for the body, emotions, and psyche. The M3 section will include movement science, music and sound regulation, and mindset practices. A major theme of this section is the implementation of daily micro-habits rather than occasional big efforts. The next section will cover relational resilience through navigating personal, professional, and digital relationships. In the final section, we'll discuss cultural considerations, discussion questions, and the bonus will be the resources in the caption. I will be exploring implications and implementations throughout the entire presentation. Background and context: why self-care matters for counselors. Counseling professions are routinely exposed to clients' trauma, distress, and emotional intensity, placing them at a heightened risk for vicarious trauma, burnout, and compassion fatigue. Compassion fatigue is a new kind of professional burnout that has been estimated to impact more than 2/3 of those in the helping profession. Most susceptible are those who suppress their emotions, lack strong out-of-support networks, and are perfectionists. Similar to burnout, some signals include emotional exhaustion, feeling detached or cynical towards clients, and loss of purpose or joy in one's career. Burnout also affects the body. A study based on the largest international sample of postgraduate psychology trainees revealed that nearly half, 49%, reported high levels of burnout, which was further linked to greater physical health difficulties. Physical symptoms include headaches, brain fog, and insomnia. If unaddressed, these occupational hazards can subtly erode emotional regulation, clinical judgment, and therapeutic presence, leading to loss of the ability to nurture. Consequently, self-care and counseling is not a personal luxury or optional wellness practice. It is a core ethical and professional responsibility essential for maintaining therapeutic effectiveness, client safety, and career longevity. Protective habits, which we'll discuss next, interrupt this chain of undesired and unhelpful manifestations and preserve clinical judgment. M3 framework: movement, techniques for the body; music, techniques for the emotions; and mindset, techniques for the psyche. First, we'll discuss movement. In this section, we're defining a sedentary lifestyle and its consequences. We'll discuss movement hacks, benefits of vigorous movement, and benefits of low-intensity movement. Sitting is the new smoking. Sedentary behavior is any waking behavior characterized by an energy expenditure of less than or equal to 1.5 METs. For context, 1 MET equals 1 energy used at rest, and less than or equal to 1.5 METs means activity that requires very little energy above resting levels, such as sitting, reclining, watching TV, or desk work. This is what Nazir et al. Describe as occupational sedentary behavior, and most working adults commonly spend 10 hours a day in this sedentary behavior. This can lead to a number of problematic outcomes, including anxiety, depression, and burnout, among other physical manifestations such as cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and obesity. These are also known risk factors of smoking, hence the quote, "Sitting is the new smoking." To reduce psychological and physical risks, Public Health Agency of Canada recommends 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical exercise per week. But we can't erase the effects of the many hours spent sitting at the desk or on the sofa with a few weekly trips to the gym. This is an inconvenient truth at a time when the majority of the population remain wedded to our desks and our computers. Therefore, we need to think of other ways we can move throughout the day beyond our workout regimens. So let's talk about some movement hacks. This slide contains some simple ideas for movement breaks throughout the day to reduce sedentary time, especially when you don't have time to exercise. Movement and multitasking. This can include drafting emails or taking calls while going for a walk. It's best to use treadmills or parks or tracks to stay attentive and safe. Micro movement breaks throughout the day. Make a commitment to stand up every 60 minutes and move for 5 to 10 minutes, or perform quick muscle sets, 10 reps of squats, push-ups, or jumping jacks. Environmental nudges. You can try drinking more water to prompt regular movement breaks, park further away from entrances, or take the stairs instead of escalators and elevators. Workspace supports can include adjustable standing desks or walking pads. And behavioral prompts can include setting alarms or reminders for stand-up and movement rituals. You can also create movement challenges with friends or colleagues to gamify and increase accountability. Now let's talk about some movement ideas we can include into our actual workouts. So the first will be high-intensity intermittent exercise, or HIIE, and strength training. This would fall into the vigorous movement category. First, a disclaimer. People with movement disabilities may be triggered as this discusses full body physical exercises. If this is you, feel free to skip to the next slide. DePauli et al. Found that high-intensity intermittent exercise, which is simply the research-specific term for the more popular, broader umbrella term high-intensity interval training, or HIIT, increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which is essentially like a fertilizer for the brain. It reduces tension, depression, and anger in women. Integrating brief bursts of high-intensity movements into our exercise routines as counselors could serve as a protective factor by supporting memory, emotional regulation, and overall neuroplasticity and resilience under the cognitive and emotional demands of this work. Similar effects have been found in men. A scoping review across 19 years, 11 countries/regions, and 570 participants of both sexes found that at large, HIIT improves anxiety and has great potential as a therapeutic tool. Large muscle strength training is also associated with better social functioning in both sexes, which matters for counselors because social connection and support is a known buffer against burnout and compassion fatigue. There are countless studies about a variety of different exercise modalities. These were just the ones that I chose as an example. Now we'll discuss the benefits of low-intensity movement. Beyond circulating blood flow, activities such as walking, hiking, or rolling for those who use wheelchairs can increase access to nature, which has a restorative effect on the mind and emotions. Directed attention involves our effortful goal-directed focus, which can become depleted after cognitively demanding work. Brief contact, 10 to 90 minutes, with green environments can improve mood and restore our minds from directed attention fatigue by engaging our soft fascination with natural stimuli, such as observing cloud formulations, flowing water, or the wind on the leaves. Importantly, even a window view of nature or a simulated nature contact can provide similar benefits. Nature contact, in tandem with moving the body, is a low-cost, practical exercise and burnout prevention strategy for counselors. Now let's dive into the music section of the M3 framework. This includes benefits of relaxing background music, music to drive motivation and boost mood, and how sound impacts the vagus nerve. Narayanan et al.'s randomized crossover trial examining stress responses during simulated surgical tasks in both undergraduates and surgeons found that relaxing, consonant, slower tempo, and low-volume music effectively calmed the nervous system and reduced tension. These findings can translate into other high-stakes environments. Counselors can listen to this type of music before and after sessions to help manage stress and emotional dysregulation, supporting better attunement and grounding when working with clients who present high affect or trauma-related distress. Did you know that music is a neurological phenomenon that can drive motivation? That's right. Even though music is auditory stimuli, it creates a propensity for action across the entire body, particularly within the tempo range of 140 to 150 BPM or faster. This tempo range can also shift people's emotional states from less happy to happier. And the bonus, this can increase our mental focus and dedication during our workouts. To emphasize music's impact on our mood, I wanted to share a quote from This Is Your Brain on Music, written by neuroscientist and musician Daniel J. Levitin. Music is being used to manipulate our emotions, and we tend to accept, if not outright enjoy, the power of music to make us experience these different feelings. Emerging sound-based interventions target brainstem autonomic pathways by engaging the functional architecture of the vagus nerve. Here are a few potentials. A method called the Safe and Sound Protocol, SSP, uses acoustic stimulation to activate the social engagement system and cue safety. Vagal nerve stimulation, VNS, directly modulates vagal pathways to recalibrate the autonomic function and reduce sympathetic dominance, which is chronic fight, flight, or freeze. Singing or humming can indirectly stimulate the vagus nerve through its slow, controlled exhalation, vibration of the vocal cords, and the engagement of facial, throat, and middle ear muscles, which is part of the social engagement system. Don't worry, you don't have to be a musical artist or a performer to experience the benefits of self-produced sound. Next time you take a shower, try singing or humming. These strategies support a return to regulated, socially engaged states to help counselors stay present and compassionate across different clients and contexts. Now for the third component of M3, mindset. In this section, we'll cover what is mindfulness, the benefits of mindfulness, mindfulness for counselors, simple mindfulness practice ideas, and sleep hygiene. There are lots of ways to target our psyche and improve our mindset. A major scientifically grounded approach, and personally one of my favorites, is mindfulness. What is mindfulness? It is the use of one's non-judgmental third-person awareness to be present and conscious of their mental, emotional, and physical states in any given experience. The practice of mindfulness is often combined with deep breathing to regulate the nervous system and the application of self-compassion to regulate emotions. The benefits of mindfulness. Mindfulness itself can function as a gentle form of exposure to distressing memories and sensations, reducing experiential avoidance tendencies, which is the tendency to escape, suppress, numb, or control unwanted internal experiences. Allowing emotionally charged material to arise within a calmer, non-judgmental state can gradually recondition the nervous system to better tolerate the emotional intensity of distressing memories and current triggers. Mindfulness's stance of acceptance rather than resistance, often described as inviting your fears to tea or leaning into fear, supports cognitive flexibility and desensitization to once powerfully distressing stimuli. For counselors, including mindfulness in our self-care practice can support greater tolerance for strong affect and reduce reactivity, increase self-awareness and presence with clients, and protect against cumulative emotional overload in trauma-exposed work. Meet your shadow and take it out for a cup of tea. Julia Cameron, The Artist's Way. Here are some simple mindfulness practice ideas. Before, between, or after sessions, you can do 2 to 5 minutes of mindful breathing or body scanning to regulate arousal and support presence. Focus on longer exhales than inhales. For instance, you could inhale for 4 and exhale for 6. Simply observe and notice internal signals with non-judgment. Fatigue, tension, emotional pull, this is just all information. And when we can do it with non-judgment, it reduces our reactivity to these internal experiences. Beyond meditation or sitting in stillness, there are a number of different ways to be mindful. Some examples include mindful eating, mindful showering, mindful walking, mindful painting. Mindfulness can also include reflective journaling from a non-judgmental stance to integrate emotional material without over-processing. One exercise you can try is called the morning pages, which is a clearing method taught by the Artist's Way author, Julia Cameron. This stream of consciousness freestyle journaling method is said to be an effective practice for discharging negative energy. On her website, juliacameronlive.com, Cameron describes this method as meeting your shadow and taking it out for a cup of coffee. Once we learn about the fact that mindfulness can surface deeply uncomfortable physical, emotional, or mental experiences, we can see why this quote fits. While we're on the subject of mindfulness, let's take a quick break to practice a 5-minute meditation. This meditation uses what's known as the trifecta, a framework consisting of awareness, acceptance, and adjustment to help facilitate mindfulness in a structured way that's easy to follow. Feel free to take a pause after the meditation to reorient yourself before proceeding with the presentation. So just to start, get yourself in a comfy position. It's ideal if you can be either sitting upright where your spine can be a little straighter or lying on your back with your knees bent so that your breath can arrive more easily into your belly. Close your eyes if you like. We'll begin using the trifecta, starting with awareness. Ask yourself, what am I feeling physically? Scan the body head to toe to acknowledge any positive or negative sensations or tensions. And then in your mind's eye, ask yourself, what am I feeling emotionally? What emotions are present? Where in the body do I feel these emotions? And what am I thinking mentally? What thoughts are here now? What will my next thought be? You're just observing what's coming up for you as you ask yourself these questions. You're not judging. Whatever is there is allowed to be there. You're not trying to create things to notice. You're just noticing what's already there and accepting that they're there. Whether positive or negative, allow yourself to let your thoughts and emotions run their course. Think of them as playing on a TV on really low volume in the background. So you're accepting what it is that you're noticing and observing, and now we'll adjust our thought energy by bringing our attention to our belly breath. So you're just going to start by taking a deep breath into your belly, and then release the jaw, exhale. When you release the jaw like that, it releases tension in the neck, which affects the entire spine. So let's go again. Inhale, belly. And release the jaw, exhale. One more time. Inhale, belly. Release the jaw, exhale. Now hold the breath out for a moment. Might be a little tricky. And on the count of 3, slowing the breath down, we're just going to allow it to arrive in our belly. Inhale for 1, 2, 3. Hold the breath in for 1, 2, 3. Exhale for 3, 2, 1. Hold the breath out for 3, 2, 1. Again, inhale belly for 1, 2, 3. Hold the breath in for 1, 2, 3. Exhale for 3, 2, 1. Hold the breath out for 3, 2, and 1 more time. Inhale belly, 1, 2, 3. Hold the breath in for 1, 2, 3. Exhale for 3, 2, 1. Hold the breath out for 3, 2, 1. Now take a big inhale. Open the jaw, exhale. Just resetting the normal breathing patterns again. Inhale, belly. Release the jaw, exhale. One more time, deep inhale. Maybe you can get a deeper breath. Inhale. Release the jaw, exhale. and you can slowly open your eyes. Welcome back to the presentation. We'll proceed with sleep hygiene. Nothing quite messes up your mental health and mindset like poor sleep hygiene. Sleep difficulties are a common contributor to stress and burnout among graduate students and counselors, and unfortunately, stress and burnout can also contribute to terrible sleep. There's nothing wrong with taking medication prescribed by a licensed medical doctor. However, when it comes to sleeping sedatives, over-reliance can increase the risk of poor sleep quality, dependency, and rebound insomnia. As a result, let's look at some other ways to manage sleep with some evidence-based sleep hygiene strategies. Create a bedtime relaxation routine. No screens 1 hour before sleep, a quiet and darkened room. You can use blackout curtains or eye masks. You want to make sure there's temperature control, not too cold or hot for your body's needs. A comfortable mattress, no food or drink 3 hours before lying down, as a full belly can cause digestive stimulation that keeps us awake, and a full bladder can also wake us up to have to relieve ourselves. Try sleep restriction, where you match the time in bed to actual sleep. Sleep restriction strengthens the body's biological drive to need sleep by increasing homeostatic sleep pressure. For example, just as going a long time without eating can increase appetite at mealtime, limiting time in bed when we are not sleeping increases the body's readiness for sleep. So sleep hunger, you could call it, which builds up while we're awake and out of bed, makes it easier for the body to initiate and sustain sleep. While sleep restriction relates to our biological needs, stimulus control is related to our psychology. Stimulus control is when we use the bed only for sleep. For example, going to bed only when sleepy or leaving the bed if unable to sleep within 15 to 20 minutes. This retrains the brain to associate the bed only with sleep, not anxiety, thinking, frustration, or working. Now we'll discuss relational resilience. Self-care plans are really powerful, but as therapists, we know full well that doing it all by ourselves is not always enough. As Alan put it, social problems require social solutions. Here we'll discuss personal relationships to close others and community, professional relationships including peers and supervision, and digital relationships where we create tech boundaries. We'll start with close others. Zhang et al. Offer a clear takeaway from their research. Building trusted support networks and actively strengthening emotional regulation skills are protective factors against compassion fatigue. In fact, social connection, along with emotional management, serves as one of the most effective buffers against the emotional toll of a variety of caregiving professions. Counselors can incorporate consistent connection and in-person contact with close others, such as trusted family, friends, or community members, into a weekly routine without overcommitting socially. Relationships with peers and professionals. In addition to friends, family, and community, supervision and personal therapy reinforce the value of having multiple relational mirrors to keep our internal world in check. Uniquely, peer consultation groups offer fewer power dynamics, greater psychological safety, and a wider range of perspectives than a single supervisor or therapist. Because peers have no evaluative authority, they can normalize reactions, highlight blind spots, and help fellow counselors disentangle their personal needs from their client's process. This diversity fosters more honest sharing and expands a counselor's flexibility in disclosing challenging experiences like vicarious trauma and countertransference. Now let's discuss our digital relationship. I think by now we all know that we probably spend too much time on our phones. There are numerous reasons for that, but let's focus on the benefit of digital detox and how we can create our tech zen. Digital detoxes, or intentional breaks from technology use, restore cognitive function and lower stress, helping counter the fatigue, anxiety, and attentional overload associated with constant device engagement. As counselors, incorporating regular digital-free intervals into our self-care routine supports mental clarity, emotional regulation, and presence, which are essential for maintaining empathic attunement and preventing compassion fatigue in high-demand clinical work. Here are some ways we can create boundaries and find our tech zen. Schedule screen-free zones using blocking apps such as Opal. Block distracting apps, social media, email, etc. during key windows. For example, 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. This is where you might want to do your morning meditation, movement, and set your focus for the day. 2 to 4 p.m. This can be protected deep work blocks. And 9 p.m. to 7 a.m. This helps with sleep hygiene and nervous system downregulation. Practice tech-free sensory grounding. Once or twice daily or during movement breaks, spend 15 minutes in a space with zero technology. Leave your phone behind and intentionally engage all 5 senses to reconnect with your environment and get physically grounded. Apply mindfulness during technology use. Make conscious and intentional decisions about when, where, why, and how to engage with tech, rather than automatic or habitual use. Limit passive scrolling to reduce cognitive overload or subliminal comparison tendencies, which can increase anxiety. And use technology in service of values, learning, connection, creativity, rather than emotional avoidance. In this presentation, we've discussed many ways that self-care supports a counselor's capacity to remain regulated, present, attuned, and resilient in the face of others' distress. However, when these practices are extended beyond personal use and introduced into clinical work, important ethical and cultural considerations must guide how and whether they are offered and applied. Self-care is culturally shaped, not culturally neutral. Ideas of rest, productivity, and taking time for oneself can be constructed differently by cultures that emphasize collective care and duty over individual self-focus. Access and privilege matter. Some self-care strategies, for instance, time off, quiet space, nature access, gym memberships, assume financial flexibility, physical ability, and schedule autonomy. Counselors must adapt self-care to real-world constraints, especially for trainees, caregivers, and people who are marginalized. Bodies and abilities differ. Movement-based self-care must be inclusive and adaptable. For example, walking or rolling, seated practices, and sensory-based regulation. Ethical care includes respecting disability, chronic illness, and neurodivergence without framing them as barriers to good self-care. Cultural trauma and adversity shape regulation. Interpersonal versus environmental adversity can shape trust, safety, and relational orientation differently. As a result, counselors must interpret stress responses within cultural and developmental contexts. Overall, ethical practice requires avoiding one-size-fits-all self-care prescriptions. In conclusion, self-care is not optional for counselors. It is a professional and ethical responsibility. Self-care is not about optimization. It's about sustainability, stability, and safety for self and others. Our nervous systems are instruments of care. Regulating them is necessary for helping other nervous systems tune to regulation. The key to self-care and change is implementing daily micro-habits rather than occasional big efforts. In other words, small, consistent practices matter more than intensity or perfection. There is no single correct self-care plan. Effective care is individualized, culturally responsible, and accessible. The bottom line is that caring for ourselves as counselors allows us to remain present, ethical, and human-centered in the face of others' suffering. I'll now invite further critical thinking with the following questions. Which part of the M3 framework, movement, music, and mindset, do you tend to use for regulation? Which do you avoid? What might that avoidance be protecting you from? At what point does pushing through stop being dedication and start becoming a risk to your health or an ethical risk to clients? How would you know you've crossed that line? Another way to frame it is, if your nervous system is an instrument of care, What signs tell you that it's drifting out of tune, and how early do you usually notice them? What do you do to intervene and retune? Mindfulness is often framed as calming, but what happens when it uncovers shadows and shame? What do you do with this discomfort and why? When you're overwhelmed, do you tend to isolate or reach out? What beliefs, personal or cultural, shape that choice? If your current self-care patterns stayed exactly the same for the next 5 years, what kind of counselor would you become? I invite you to please share any tools not mentioned in this presentation that you have found helpful. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Feel free to connect and see the caption for resources, including meditations, breathing exercises, some podcasts, and books. And stick around for the last few slides if you're interested in seeing my academic references used throughout the presentation. Happy counseling!